Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, September 17th, 2020. Time for another show, and that's all we've got in terms of a standard opening to the show. Well, I'm glad I'm even able to get everything on the air. A little bit of a hiccup in the morning startup routine. Nothing terrible. Probably nothing you even noticed. Maybe Justice figured it out. He knows what it is. It's a secret. I can't tell you. It won't affect the outcome of the show, except that it's going to, I guess, choke me as I begin to try to announce the start of the show. Daily Co's Radio is live now. Kagro X, me, David Waldman, presents 2 hours of the finest sedition in America. You know, sedition is back. Very hot these days. All the kids love sedition. In fact, I'm watching on Twitter people learning the word as though it were a new one to them. I guess they forgot about learning about the Alien and Sedition Acts in U.S. history, or I don't know. Maybe they only taught that in AP U.S. history. I think they always taught that. Anyway, the point is, people forgot about it, and Bill Barr and Donald Trump are bringing back the term sedition. So I'll present the finest 2 hours I can find, anyway, on short notice about sedition. And if you don't agree, I guess your money back, unless Arnold doesn't get out of the bathroom over here. You'll be placed under house arrest and guarded by a platoon of scowling waiters, which, by the way, just reminding you, we can't, even if we deputize those waiters, quarter them in your home unless we're willing to risk violating the Third Amendment. And it's about time somebody violated the Third Amendment around here. We've been waiting for that one to get litigated, and it's just not happening to this point. Okay, thanks to Bill in seditious Portland, Maine, for bringing us that morning tweet. And yeah, how do you like that? Sedition back in fashion. Apparently, I don't know which direction we'll end up spending the most time on, but let's see. There's articles about Trump normalizing the threat of violence in the wake of the upcoming election, whether he wins or loses. I guess once you get people cranked up for violence, it's going to be hard to hold them back. And it won't be a cause for them not to try to beat up their political enemies if they win on the Trump side. It'll be cause for celebration, which they very often celebrate by beating up their political enemies. So there's that. Bill Barr, allegedly the Attorney General of the United States, like I said, bringing sedition as a charge back into fashion. I don't believe anybody has ever been charged with that, or at least certainly not for a very long time. But apparently, I don't know where was he speaking last night that everyone was excerpting his words. I'll grab the Washington Post story on it just to check up on that. Yes, this particular report on it is headlined, Barr accuses Justice Department of headhunting and meddling with politics. What's the story here? Delivering a scathing critique of his own Justice Department Wednesday night. Why? He was speaking at Hillsdale College, where everyone was probably sick with coronavirus. I don't know. It was a college, so I assume everybody is sick with coronavirus there. It is also a school with deep ties to conservative politics, so it's sick in other ways as well. Barr directly addressed the criticism that has been building for months inside the department toward his heavy hand in politically sensitive cases, particularly those involving associates of President Trump. And, well, I'm sure it goes on from there. The people discussing last night's happenings pointing out that I guess they are being directed by President Trump to look into how can they levy charges against political enemies. Those things that they say when and if they should happen post-election, and that the targets are Trump administration officials or Trump supporters, would be a sign that we had fallen over into liberal authoritarianism, that we had gone the way of Eastern Europe or Latin America, banana republics in which they were indicting former administration officials. However, if they are indicting you for your political opposition to them, that is awesome, and you are guilty of sedition. So you know how that works. That's called gimmitarianism, and we've previewed that for years here on the show. So you should be ready for that coming. And by the way, you should be aware that some of the criticisms leveled by Barr are only it's a one-way street. In other words, though he said we would be in danger of turning into some sort of Eastern European style nation if we were to, for instance, move to a national lockdown to combat coronavirus. This, too, was presented in a political light. The quote from him on this one was, putting a national lockdown, stay-at-home orders is like house arrest. But then he goes on and says it's also, by the way, like slavery. Other than slavery, which was a different kind of restraint, that's one way of putting it, this is the greatest intrusion on civil liberties in American history. Barr said as a round of applause came from the crowd, which of course wasn't social distancing, I'm sure, because that would also be like slavery. Lest you get the idea that should they either win or lose the election, but use the time in between November and inauguration to crack down on their political enemies for whatever reason and, say, impose some sort of a national curfew or something like it. And if you tried to shame Barr into withdrawing that order, because, of course, it would be totally hypocritical given his comments on what a national lockdown would be like, he will just laugh in your face and then throw you in jail for sedition. So don't get any ideas about using the breadcrumbs he leaves behind against him. That doesn't work with Gimmitarians. All right, so that's where we stand just in terms of the authoritarianism index. It should be real fun dealing with these guys post-election. We've got a number of articles that discuss it. There's actually one that Brian Monroe suggested to us late in the show yesterday, or perhaps after the show was off the air, that I had sitting in pocket and actually didn't get to. That's sort of the story of our lives here, so maybe we can get around to sharing that. First, Greg is here to tell us how sedition is polling. I don't know if we've been out on that one in the field long enough. We might have to ask more people about sedition and what they think about that, and maybe that's a new title for the show. They have NPR has a morning edition. We could certainly be morning sedition if that's not already taken.
Shouldn't we be alien in sedition? Don't they
Right. I forgot I don't want to leave the aliens out. Sorry, aliens.
Aliens are a big deal these days.
Yes.
I
I
might
thought it
even be
was
life on
Aileen,
Venus, for example.
But yes, like alien against your house. But it turns out it's pronounced alien. Thank you. All right.
So
I'm here for 2 seconds.
You know what's going on? Biden's in
no.
the process of winning this election. Let me explain.
That's why they're upset. Thank you.
That's why they're
Couldn't
upset.
put my
That's why they're
finger on
doing
it.
all this stuff.
Okay.
Here's a piece from Jonathan Bernstein, political scientist. With weeks to go, Trump needs a big change. And I have to tell you, I've been trying to concentrate more on what the political scientists are saying than what the political reporters are saying. And I'll get to Jake Sherman and tell you why.
Well, they're both political. So.
You'd think. But with weeks to go, Trump needs a big change. Even assuming some errors, recent polling suggests the president will have a hard time repeating his path to victory because people are voting. There's about 60,000 ballots returned by now. I think there's like 3 in Florida, and there's
fake.
2 somewhere else, and 60,000 from North Carolina.
Unless
So
they're
evenly
Republican.
distributed.
Okay.
The totals are going to increase dramatically once we hit October. Political scientist Michael McDonald has all the details at his early voting site, and I should add, there's nothing at all suspicious or fraudulent about absentee and other early voting. And we're still seeing plenty of state and national polls, more from this morning's polls, and there's very little evidence of significant change. Biden's up by about 7, and by a smaller margin in most likely tipping point states, suggesting he needs to win by about 3 points nationally in order to win the Electoral College. But don't tell me about national polls. Tell me about state polls. The fact is, if it's over 3, national polls tell you the story.
Okay. Well, so it's a twofer, really.
Yeah. There's probably a large enough lead to withstand normal polling errors, even if the polls happen to be overestimating Biden's support, which isn't necessarily the case. And I highly recommend the new Upshot polling averages, which show what would happen with a polling error similar to those in 2012 or 2016, with 2 caveats. One is the chart assumes any error would be in the same direction, and the other is that the polling error includes the final 3 weeks of polls in each of the previous elections, but there's good reason to believe that the race actually shifted, and that wasn't polling error, because James...
Okay. Yeah, what's that, Abby? Got a hold of a chew toy on that.
I can't say this on the air.
Oh, all right. I looked up morning sedition. It's been used, so I'm screwed on that.
In 2016, Trump, not morning alien sedition. In
Right.
2016, Trump needed both that late change and some polling error in order to win narrowly, despite trailing in the polls. And the most dramatic poll released on Wednesday was from Maine. It showed Biden with a huge lead statewide and a solid lead in the closely contested 2nd congressional district. It's a Q poll. It tends to lean a Democrat, but not by 12 points.
Oh.
And, it also showed Collins 50. Losing, which was very nice.
I like that.
Because she's certainly high on my list of people I'd like to see lose. Pundits were quick to label this survey an outlier, which it surely is, and we can expect some goofy poll results, but it doesn't mean we should pretend the poll never happened. The right way to treat unusual and unlikely results is to include them in the polling averages, not to ignore them.
Even you don't even weed them out of the averages. Okay.
Right? Unless you think that the polling is bogus. Right?
I've seen it.
So
I've
Economist doesn't include Rasmussen, for example.
I see.
The one poll that showed Trump with a lead yesterday. Assuming that they lose a seat in Alabama, they'll need 4 pickups to reach 50, and thus a majority if Biden wins. And Democrats have a few other pickup opportunities. We talked about that on the show yesterday. North Carolina, for example, Arizona, Colorado, and then Maine, Collins. And then we also have possibilities of Montana and Idaho. So there's other stuff out there. And Georgia's just like wacky. So maybe Georgia, but, Brian Kemp cheats, so I don't know. He's the governor, and so his cheating matters. And so reaching 52 or more isn't out of the question, but Maine and perhaps North Carolina are still close enough. They certainly could fall 1 or 2 short. One interesting shift, a few months ago, it was hard to picture Maine's moderate Collins surviving a bad Republican year. Maybe it's more likely now, but not clear.
You think?
That's still a bad poll for her.
Okay.
In fact, no poll shows her ahead.
Well, I wouldn't show her ahead if it was up to me.
But so there's that. And today, this morning, we got new polling out of a new player, Cook Political and Kaiser Foundation. Right, new polling. And they decided to look at North Carolina, Florida, and Arizona.
Okay.
Right, North Carolina, Biden has a 2-point lead. Yes. Suffolk University also out today in North Carolina, Biden with a 4-point lead.
Okay.
We're on North Carolina in a minute. Florida, Kaiser has Biden up by 1, and Arizona, Biden +5.
Hey. All right.
Okay. That's pretty good. Sure. Arizona +5. It's so good.
How good is it?
In fact, that what Cook Political did is say, you know what? We're moving Arizona from toss-up to lean Democrat.
Oh, all right.
That means that when you look at their Cook Political report, nonpartisan, highly respected, they and Stu Rothenberg have been the gold standard of prognosticators for years and years and years before the Nates came along. So Cook Political says, you know what? We think that Joe Biden has 290 electoral votes right now.
Oh, well, that's over. All right. Phew. All right. What else do you want to talk about?
So the lean Democrats, the solids, likelies, the lean Democrats.
Yeah.
And the likely Democrat is now Colorado, Maine, and Virginia.
Okay.
The lean Democrats are Arizona, Michigan, Minnesota, Nebraska 2, Nevada, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Okay. The toss-ups are Florida, Georgia, Maine 2, which, by the way, was going toward Biden in yesterday's poll, and North Carolina.
Okay.
The lean Republicans is Iowa, Ohio, and Texas. All right?
Ohio.
So the toss-ups, Florida, Georgia, Maine 2, which is worth an electoral vote, and North Carolina.
Right.
The toss-ups. We could win all of those.
All right.
The lean Republicans are Iowa, Ohio, and Texas. And you could win those in a perfect world, but they're hard. And so you're not going to see Biden spend a tremendous amount of time there. You can see him, he's getting a ton of money, so you could see him spend money there, especially on radio ads.
Sure. Why not?
But if you really want to know what's going on here, any campaign manager will tell you the most precious bit of stuff that a campaign owns is the candidate's time. Not the money. They can always get more money. They can borrow. They can go into debt. They do that all the time.
True.
but you can't get time back. So look to see where Biden is spending time, not so much where Biden is spending money on ads. That may be a head fake. But if Biden goes to Pennsylvania a couple of times, they're fighting for Pennsylvania. If Biden goes to Kenosha, they're interested in Wisconsin. If Biden goes to Florida, and he went to Orlando, they're interested in Florida, you know, that sort of thing. So Florida, Georgia, Maine, and North Carolina are the toss-ups. I'm not seeing Biden spend a lot of time in Georgia right now, and I don't see him spending any time in Ohio, Iowa, or Texas. Now, that's going to get people annoyed because they say, why not us? We're close. We could win. Surveys say. But you got to make some choices about limited time, and so that's what they're doing. Nonetheless, with that map, we're talking about 290 electoral votes. That doesn't mean that Biden has won.
Right,
you know,
because
the usual
not having the
caveat.
election.
But, you know, it's not crazy to look at the non-changing picture in the polls and say, you know, Biden's ahead by 7 nationally, and apparently he's got 290 leaning electoral votes, and if things go the way they are without a change, he's going to win. That's what Bernstein is saying, Jonathan Bernstein. And that's what I'm saying. That's what I've been saying.
Eventually, if you lean long enough, you have to fall over eventually. Especially
if
lean long
enough, you're gonna you know, declare yourself one way or the other. Now, North Carolina is interesting because I sent you some pictures of North Carolina polling, which is directly from 538.
All right.
And right now,
I see it.
For example, they say that Biden leads by 1.2 points. And if you look at the polls back in September 10th, for example, Benson said that it was tied. Rasmussen said Trump's ahead by 1. Trafalgar said Trump's ahead by 2. Survey USA said Trump was even. That was on September 14th. On the 15th, CNN said Biden's up by 5. And then today, Kaiser says Biden's up by 2, and Suffolk says Biden's up by 4. Now, you might look at that and say, oh, there's been a little bit of movement toward Biden, but that's not really true. Each one of these is a completely different poll by a completely different pollster. So you don't have any trends to compare. You just have different pollsters. And you can't compare Rasmussen to anybody.
Okay.
Fact. And same with Trafalgar. Trafalgar, as a general rule, I tell people, oh, you see a Trafalgar poll? Add 5.
Oh.
For Biden. Because Trafalgar says we're going to put special sauce in here, as Armando calls it, to make sure that the shy Trump voter is covered.
Okay.
We think that, you know, there's more Trump voters out there than any other pollster, and it's part of our methodology, and so we're always going to be favoring Trump by a bit.
So they ask more Trump
voters. Take their +2, and that makes it a Biden +3 if you add 5 by my rule of thumb.
Yes.
And that matches all the other polls.
Well,
but it's not really, you know, it's one.
It's not what they have.
The other. So if you take a look at the graph,
C- rated here.
Yeah, exactly. If you take a look at the graph. Of the polling result over the course of the year, from March 2020 until now, it's pretty steady.
Yes.
Right? And it currently has Biden 1.2. So I was describing this on Twitter, and the way I put it is, you know, I've always thought of North Carolina as a very stubborn state. Go back to Mitt Romney and Obama race, for example. Romney wound up winning by 3. But that was just, you know, except for a little blip here and there after a debate, the first debate especially. You know, that's one of those states where a 2-point lead may stay a 2-point lead the entire time. And you can't catch him. You know, and so I was describing this and I said, you know, North Carolina is just a really stubborn state. It's really hard to move that. And David Carroll, who is one of the co-authors of The Party Decides, you know, one of the political scientists said, but we describe this as elastic and inelastic.
Okay.
So at least we have the right term. So North Carolina is an inelastic state. And there's reasons for that. It has to do with, you know, who the parties are. If you have most of the black citizens in one party and most of the white citizens in another party, you're not going to get a lot of movement.
I see.
So if you have an all-white state, you know, who knows? Yeah, so Wisconsin at 6 crazy. May not last. It may be Wisconsin 2 in a minute, in a heartbeat. It's an elastic state. North Carolina is an inelastic state. And a 1.2 lead may last for months. And it's only 1.2, but you still can't catch them. So, North Carolina is interesting in that regard. And North Carolina is already voting. Yeah. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to concentrate on them. And that could turn out to be, in the end, we'll see, we'll have to wait, but that could turn out to be a narrow Biden win based on what we're seeing now. Not because 60,000 votes out of millions tells us what's going on, but just because it's an inelastic state and Biden's had a small lead for some time now.
Yes. Maybe they're faking it, the whole inelasticity thing, that just for advertising dollars. If we tell everybody it's always close, they'll spend lots of money here, even though we've already made up our mind. I don't know who would coordinate such a thing. It can't happen. It's fake. But it would be a great story if it were true. How much fun would that be? Just siphoning off advertising dollars for a big waste of time.
Right. Meanwhile, with everything else going on, I was peering a little bit in the crosstabs of the Ipsos poll, Reuters Ipsos poll, that had Biden +9 from yesterday. And I found an interesting nugget here. I don't know if I sent it, so I'm going to send it again just because it's easier to find that way. And I'm looking at what's important.
Okay. Good. I like importance.
If the 2020 presidential election were being held today, which of the following candidate traits would be the most important factor for you in deciding who to vote for? Okay. And at the top of the list has a robust plan to help the nation recover from the impact of coronavirus. All respondents, 27%. All registered voters, 27%. Likely voted, 28%. Let's just look at the likely voters. So 28% think that a plan for coronavirus is important. That's good because Biden was just on TV yesterday, well covered by the networks, at least the cable networks, about his plan for coronavirus. And guess what? He's talking about how important it is that if you get a vaccine, you have to do things like make sure you have a handle on, dare I say it, distribution.
Oh, that part.
Yeah, well, he won my heart with that one, as you know.
Sure.
When they were trying to get hydroxychloroquine to everybody, mistakenly so, they never had a distribution plan. We talked about that on the show, about how ridiculous that is, because that's such a big part and parcel of actual paying attention to how you manage things.
Probably a good thing.
And Biden spent a good deal of time talking about the differences between the vaccines, which ones need cold storage, how difficult it is to get the vaccines to people, how you have to transport them in bulk, how that means it probably doesn't go directly to your pharmacy, a whole bunch of details that matter, which make it very hard to say, oh, well, Sleepy Joe, boy, that guy just has some mental issues.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's an awful lot of logistics to keep track of. You know Trump can't do that.
Yeah, I was looking at that. Sleepy Joe said something about RMA. What is that about?
Yeah, I imagine Trump just figures everybody just, will, I don't know what.
Donald
put it
can't
in a
keep up. So,
fountain pen and
anyway,
themselves.
It turns out that the robust plan to help the nation recover is the most important issue. Okay. And then number 2 issue, ability to restore trust in American government, 24%.
Yeah. Well, who wins that?
It doesn't specifically say here. I have to go back and take a look at the all the other crosstabs, but I just wanted to highlight what people think are important.
All right.
Strong on the economy and job creation, 18%. And by the way, there was just a revision from ADC. I think they took their 1.2 million jobs and made it a negative 500,000.
That's different.
That were gained in the last report.
Different number.
That could have been from a couple of months ago, but not good when you revise downward like that in such a big way, since Trump was touting it as the reason why you should reelect him. Well, that just vanished. Nice. Anyway, it turns out that's the third issue behind coronavirus and trust in government.
All right.
Right? 28, 24, and 18 is the third issue on the economy. The next one is tough on crime and civil unrest. That comes in at 12.
Okay.
Healthcare, 7. Environment, 5. Environmentalists are going to be disappointed. The West Coast is burning, and it's only 5%. And then strong on immigration, 4. Yes, so that's what people are telling people. Strong on civil rights, 4. So there's burning issues that are clearly important to us that aren't necessarily important to the country as a whole. But coronavirus, and that's been my theory of the case, coronavirus is the single most important issue, and it remains that way. Not necessarily so in the Kaiser poll when they look at swing voters, specifically swing voters in the 3 states that they surveyed. Arizona, North Carolina, and Florida. Now, swing voters, interestingly, from talking to Drew Altman, who's the head of the Kaiser Foundation, their swing voters aren't people who haven't decided which of the candidates to vote for.
Oh, yeah,
their swing voters tend to be younger, Latino, moderates, not conservatives, tend to lean Biden, and they still haven't decided whether or not to vote at all.
I would like them to.
That's their swing. The swing is, do I vote or do I not vote?
Don't swing on that. Do the job.
Well, that's what I would say.
Okay.
But we talked about Florida the other day,
so
and we talked about it in terms of the Latino vote. And I thought Biden had room to improve simply because I think a lot of the younger voters are late deciders by nature.
They haven't even decided to vote. Yeah.
And so this is just more supportive material that is in fact the case. So that means Biden's numbers may grow if he can convince them, and that's why the Florida trip was so important. And we'll see what kind of effect it has. But obviously, you have to spend more time doing that. Now, the Republicans are spending a whole lot of time, trying to court the Latino community in Florida. They've invested. They've done tons of radio ads. Biden is, in fact, playing catch-up, but that doesn't mean that it's a failed catch-up. A lot of this stuff actually turns out to be important if you do it late. And probably the best example of that is Rick Scott, because he put a ton of his own money into his own election for senator in the last 4 or 5 days, and that's how he won.
Okay, so it's movable in Florida in the last couple
So
of days.
it's movable in Florida because you get these undecideds to decide to vote. So that's my point.
Okay, well, Florida, you should vote. That's the message, I guess. That's all I have for you at the moment. I absolutely, definitely think you should vote. No two ways about that. And do it early if you can. Why not? We'll be right back. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. We have much more to cover and no time to do it. But all right, and I understand you're up against. I guess you're not up against a deadline, but you have plans for later in the day.
I do. As I said on Twitter, I sent a picture of the absentee ballot request that I got, because in Connecticut this year you can vote by mail, and what you do is everybody was sent a absentee ballot. You can fill it out and check. I want to vote by mail because of COVID. That's an option. And they tell you in the mailing, if you want to vote by mail, just check off COVID.
Okay. That's
did.
Distinct from the ballot itself. Again, because
right.
Trump will say you got a ballot. This is a request for ballot.
So I stuck it in the envelope and sealed it.
Yes.
And I could have put it in the mail, but I'm not sure I trust the mail. And so I am driving it over to my town clerk right after the show. Oh. So I will be preparing myself to vote. And I'm not going to go through 10 o'clock. I'll probably be done around 9:45 because I got some other stuff to do.
Okay.
But I'm just telling people, if I leave early, it's to go vote, in a manner of speaking.
Yes, or to prepare to vote. And this is at the building that's got the flagpole in the way in the street?
No.
Or no?
No. This is the old psychiatric hospital that was closed down and then bought by the town from the state for $1.
Nice.
With
haunted?
Lovely old buildings that were converted to municipal town offices.
Yeah, I'd go early.
Unfortunately, along the way, it turned out they all had asbestos, so it cost the town a fortune for the $1. But, that's the way it goes.
Yeah, I guess so. Well, the land was worth it for $1.
But now we have a senior center, and now we have, a recreational facility for the youth facility. We have a new town hall digs. And it's
Great.
really a lovely old place. I should send you some pictures.
Yeah. I wouldn't go there at night, like
No,
or
don't go there.
Halloween or
It's really
anything.
scary.
Yeah, I mean,
But it's a great place for a movie. And people have used it for movie
psychiatric
sets.
hospital. Right, exactly. Okay, and then Jack Nicholson chops through the door. And,
Yeah, something like that. A lot of goes there.
Psychiatric
So
hospital.
one of the things that was also interesting this week
yeah.
is I started to get a series of texts, and I'm up to about 7 or 8 different Republican senators who somehow got a hold of my telephone number, my mobile phone,
Sure.
and started texting me.
They wiretapped you.
Now, I get these all the time from Move On and from the Democratic Party and, do you want to join us in texting uncommitted voters and, all this sort of stuff. I get all of that, right? But now I'm starting to get it from the Republicans. And I started to think, what kind of list did they buy and how are they spending their money? So let me just read 2 of them. I said there's about 7. When I first started to get them, I would just, delete and block. And then I started writing, stop sending me, take me off your list. But each one was from a different telephone number, so that didn't do any good. So I just saved the last couple.
All right.
This one is Tim Scott here. Dems have called me a black traitor, a token, Uncle Tom. Gregory, I'm ready to fight back and need to know if you'll join me. And then they give
Who's Gregory?
a website.
Yeah.
And if you click on the website, it's WinRed, which is the poor attempt to mimic Act Blue, but doesn't
I
raise
see.
nearly as much money.
Okay.
So all of these are WinRed sites that they're directing you to. And first of all, what kind of audience would be receptive to a text like that?
Yeah. Tim Scott
And secondly, what list do they have where I'm listed as Gregory?
Yeah.
I mean, that is my formal first name, but I don't use it.
It's like your attendance sheet from first grade, maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
Huh. I have some texts from the Trump campaign. I have several from.
Yeah, well,
from
let me
Matt.
read you the Martha McSally, and then let's do yours.
Oh, yes.
Because I only have 2.
Why you?
And the second one,
I wanna go.
and at least she didn't ask me to fast. But it's Martha McSally. Joe Biden is planning a major event in Arizona. Gregory, send Dems a message. Arizona will stay red. Pitch in now, and then it's the Win Blue site, the Win Red site.
Oh, okay. Yeah, right. One red. She'll ask you to. Now, she could send you one that asks you to fast in a couple days and be on the nose. But this is just so that she can have your food money. I remember that. Okay.
Right. I'm waiting for that. Yeah, because I originally got one. I threw it out. I don't remember what it said. But, it was probably something like this because it was from Ted Cruz. It probably said, Ted Cruz here. Nobody likes me, and you probably don't either. Send me money.
Or soup. Right. Whatever. That's it. Ted Cruz, Tim Scott, Martha McSally. Very good. Actually, I just thought about it. Martha McSally is literally telling people, give me your lunch money. I didn't really think
I also
about that
got one from Joni Ernst. Stop the Democrats from turning Iowa blue.
Wow. So you're on the NRSC list.
I'm thinking, I don't know where this is, but look, I mean, the whole idea is you really would like to raise money in a campaign, right? And then you would like to spend some time smart targeting people who you might convince.
Yeah.
If this is the Death Star, I understand how Luke Skywalker won.
There's always a vulnerability built into the system. Yeah,
I mean, isn't that a waste of money?
Doing.
How did they waste the money with you?
I don't know how much. They wasted their money with me from the Trump campaign. Apparently a guy named Matt at Trump HQ, I don't know whether he's a real person or not, has texted me, 4 times, starting on August 24th. The fake news is hiding away the real Biden. The Biden they don't want you to see is mentally unfit. Click here and see for yourself.
Really?
Yeah, I got hi, this is Matt from Trump HQ. Have you seen the riots in Portland? That was Bill, the other Portland. Are they alarming you as well? Reply yes or no to share your concerns. Then another rioting one. Looting, rioting, burning cities. These are the realities of a Biden America, except, of course, Trump is president. See his future for yourself and ensure it's not ours. It's our present. Click here. And then one news alert, President Trump's second-term agenda defends law and order. He'll continue to protect our police and fight for our safety. Reply, learn for more. Right. I haven't replied to any of them about anything. Take me off the list or otherwise. My only guess is that they may just be texting everyone in America or everyone on a list. And if they get back, F you, take me off the list, they say, all right, put that one on the Democrats list, and then they quietly go out with an LLC and sell a list of Democrats to Democrats and make their money back.
That could be. Hi, this is Matt from Decepticon HQ.
Right. Mm-hmm.
It's on. Choose which side you want to be on.
Yeah. Basically. Yeah, I mean, I guess you can probably do that. Or they may just have no idea what they're doing. That is a possibility.
I think, it may well be that they really don't know what they're doing. If this is the vaunted campaign, which is secretly doing social media that you all don't know about, I don't know that I'm that impressed.
There is secret media going on that we don't know about, though.
On Facebook. I mean, there's plenty of Facebook pages and stuff like that, but I don't know if this is it.
No, that probably isn't it. I've read, actually, it's focused on Spanish language radio in Florida.
Yes. And so we want to find out what's going on there.
Yeah, what is going on there?
But again, that's why, it was important that Biden was down there and spending his own money on ads. And that's where the Bloomberg money comes in. So we'll have to see how that's going. For the moment, it turns out Florida is a toss-up. It will remain a toss-up. It's going to be a very close state. There's nothing anybody can do about that. However, in the moment, let's just look at Florida polling just to give you an idea of what's going on.
All right.
Biden's ahead by 2.1 points. Today was Kaiser Family, Biden +1, and yesterday was Monmouth, Biden +5. That was a big one. Florida Atlantic University, Biden was ahead until they pushed leaners, and then they got it to Biden tied 50-50. They pushed the leaners because it's 50-50. Like every single person in Florida knows what they're doing.
Oh, okay. Well,
Venison Strategy from September 10th, Biden +2. September 9th, we had St. Pete, Biden +3. Morning Consult, Biden +5. And Change Research, Biden +3. So the only poll that showed Trump ahead in the last 2 weeks, we have a Biden +3 from Redfield and Wilton. GQR had a Biden +5. And Marist had a tie with LV and an RV of Trump +1. One of those interesting things where as you look at these polls this year, the LVs and RVs are unusual. Registered voters generally lean a little bit more Democratic, and the likely voters tend to lean a little bit more Republican. But this year, many, not all of the pollsters, have actually found that the likely voters are a little bit more Democratic.
Maybe all of us are.
Maybe all of us are, but, that's not true across the board. MU Law comes to mind, for example. They had a +7 lead for Biden in their latest poll, but they had a very tight LV screen, and it came out as +4 Biden by the time they were finished. So that's one of the few pollsters that actually showed the traditional RV-LV split. Everybody else shows it much closer, like a 1-point difference or 1-point difference actually leaning Democratic. So that's what makes this year a little bit more unusual. Now, remember, most of the pollsters, and Suffolk is not one of them, not my favorite pollster. Yep. That's David, what is his name, Pantiagoulis, the guy that stopped polling the Romney Obama race with Romney ahead and just didn't do any polling in the last week. And then was totally surprised when Obama won. Okay. He's that pollster. And he doesn't wait for education. So the fact that Suffolk, for example, has Biden ahead by just a little bit in North Carolina today is of interest because I don't know what that means. I don't know what that means.
It's hard to tell with a pollster like that, I guess. Sometimes I stop polling.
Yeah. Right. So he had a +4 for Biden, whereas Kaiser had a +2. Now, I did find something really interesting on a slightly different topic that I wanted to talk about from that Suffolk poll. And that is within the poll in North Carolina.
Yes.
They asked a question about vaccine. Which is something that
you inject.
You don't always see.
Not get a disease, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
And for one thing, how do you rate President Trump's handling of the coronavirus pandemic? Excellent, good, fair, or poor? Poor was 51%.
Okay. That wasn't, they asked 51% poor people. That was the actual rating.
Right. 17% excellent, 20% good, 11% fair,
Excellent.
or 51% poor. So 62% fair or poor, everybody else is okay with it. So he's not getting good ratings
Okay, good.
on the issue altogether.
The only way that makes sense is if people, when you're asked, do you rate it excellent? The answer, you mean excellent, like Montgomery Burns excellent? Like people are dying, excellent.
Yeah, exactly. How concerned are you that widespread mail-in voting would lead to voter fraud? Very concerned, 33%. Somewhat concerned, 24%. Not very concerned, 16%. And not at all concerned, 25%. So the voter fraud thing is certainly penetrated down there.
Yeah, sure. And of course, you could be thinking that it could be on behalf of Republicans.
Right. And remember, North Carolina is the one that has this enormous Democratic lead in the requested ballots.
Okay.
Right. And like 57%, 56% of the return ballots so far have been Democratic.
Okay.
If you remember these numbers, I'm throwing them off the top of my head, so they may be somewhat
I
off.
don't remember them.
And like 13% were Republican. So put that in perspective. Of the following ways to vote in November, this is North Carolina, remember.
Yes. Right.
How do you plan to vote? Do you plan to vote on Election Day in person? 39%. Before Election Day in person? 38%. By mail or absentee ballot? 20%.
20%.
Okay. 57% of North Carolinians are going to vote before Election Day.
50 what? 4?
57.
7?
58.
8?
Yeah.
12? Okay.
58% are going to vote before Election Day, and about 39% are going to vote on Election Day. So Democrats have to run up a lead on Election Day. You can figure that Republicans are going to dominate, but it's only 40% of the vote.
Yeah.
So you got to run up that lead before you get there. So we'll have an idea in North Carolina, who returned the absentee ballots, what party, and who voted early absentee or early voting, whatever they call it down there, before Election Day in person, early in-person voting. We'll have an idea of that well before the election even happens on November 3rd. So that'll be interesting.
Yeah. I mean, except for traffic reporters on November 3rd.
Right. Let's see. So let me see if I could find that. It's a long survey. Let's see if I could find that vaccine question here.
Yeah. I like the different methods of voting. They did not include wrestling a pig.
Wrestling a pig. When a federally approved COVID-19 vaccine is available, will you take it as soon as you can?
Okay.
21%.
Yeah, I don't even update my phone as soon as I can, but go on.
Wait a while until others have taken it.
There you go.
51%.
You go first. Sure.
Not take the vaccine, 24%.
Yeah,
and then undecided 4%. That not take the vaccine, 24%.
Yeah.
And 71%, 72% eventually. Those are not bad numbers. I was expecting the not take the vaccine to be a lot higher.
Well, when they included a you go first option,
a lot of people took it.
Okay.
So I checked with the experts. Jason Reifler and Brendan Nyhan, for example, have written a lot about vaccine hesitancy. They do that from their academic political scientist position. And Jason Reifler wrote back and said, this is similar to information we get from other countries as well. So it's totally in line with pretty much where we're at.
Or it's an international conspiracy.
Right.
We have to consider that.
One way or the other. So that's actually fairly reassuring. So if Biden should go ahead and win, if that happens.
Yeah.
Not when that happens, but if that happens.
All right, fair enough.
There's room to repair some of the vaccine damage that Trump is doing by getting everybody not to trust anything he does. That's my point.
Okay. And you could do that by telling everybody this is the science.
We did it carefully. This is the steps we took to take. It's all been transparent. This is how we know it's okay. As Biden said yesterday, I submitted it to a separate board of independent people. That's normally what you do. In fact, there is such a board, and it exists now. And people generally, get these opinions of how the vaccine is and whether or not it's good and whether we should do it from independent experts all the time. And so sticking with that and not going with, I don't know, Jason Miller or Michael Caputo, who's just out at HHS now.
Yes, out to lunch.
The Russian agent who was trying to get the CDC to change all the reports, and the scientist with him are both out.
All right.
So that's all good news. So public pressure does in fact work. Speaking of public pressure, one more thing to mention.
Oh, all right.
Ron Johnson says that his probe is going to be out next week. And I said, that's too much information for me. I don't care where your probes are and what you do with them.
This might be illegal.
That was my first reaction. So it's just a little bit too much information for me. Thank you very much.
Like he's got a raincoat or something.
But Kyle Cheney says Romney says Ron Johnson's Biden investigation is, quote, a political exercise. Romney's comments followed Johnson's decision to withdraw a proposed subpoena. Kyle Cheney's a reporter for Politico. To withdraw a proposed subpoena vote for Ambassador Bridget Brink in connection with the Burisma investigation. Romney would have opposed the vote, dooming it to a 7-7 tie, so Johnson withdrew it.
Ambassador who?
I
Brink?
don't know.
Yeah, all right. Well,
Romney cited recent comments in the media, a clear reference to Johnson's public statements about his report damaging Biden's election chances. He said that last month and reiterated it last week. Okay. The important thing about the subpoenas that Romney did support, Johnson now has unilateral authority to subpoena Andrew McCabe, Bruce Orr, Stephen Halper, and others at any time.
I see.
Okay.
FBI people.
But Kyle Cheney then went ahead, when I was talking to him on Twitter, also referred to another piece that he had in Politico, calling Ron Johnson committee chair besieged on all sides and on an island. It turns out he's been fighting with McConnell about this because McConnell's not totally supporting him. He's got Romney sniping from the Republican side. He's got all the Democrats saying that you're a jerk. And this is the atmosphere in which he's producing the report next week. And I just don't think it's going to do any good given all of that.
Okay.
Everybody's going to tell you, whether it's Republicans or Democrats, not everybody, but there'll be Republicans who say, and every Democrat who will say, this is ridiculous. It's a political hit job.
Even Republican Mitt Romney says,
even Republican Mitt Romney.
And McConnell, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Well,
McConnell won't fully support him. And Johnson is saying, I have to do this because it's payback to impeaching Trump.
Which, again, not supposed to say.
Right. So he's saying all the quiet parts out loud. And then next week when it drops, I just don't think it's going to have the political impact that, let's say, Barr's karaoke reading of the Mueller report had. Because at that time, we expected these guys to be honest, at least, to stretch the truth, but at least stick to the truth. We now know that's not even close.
Yeah, we probably didn't really even think that, but I don't know. Lip service to it.
Well, lip service from media, because remember, nobody reads these things. It's what media says about them.
When we say us, we mean them.
Yeah.
I think so. All right. Well, where's do you want to send me that one, whatever you're reading from? Or is that
absolutely, because I have a whole chain there. And then the other reporter I want to cover is Jake Sherman, because I think that's also quite important in terms of how all this stuff shakes out. And give me a minute to find Jake. Where did I put you, Jake?
With
Jake Sherman from Politico Playbook.
All right. Speak up, Jake. From
let's see. While we look up Jake Sherman, I just want to remind everybody that Robert Redfield testified in Congress that masks are important, and Trump said he doesn't know what he's talking about. And this morning, White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows said Redfield's not tuned in to what those closest to the process know about when the public will have access to a vaccine. Redfield is the director of the CDC.
Yeah, he doesn't know anything about vaccines.
So he doesn't know anything about this.
Right. That was a big moment yesterday. Don't trust the scientists. The scientists don't always know what's going on. Or somebody had a great, ridiculous statement about that science doesn't always know what's best for everybody.
Right, but the whole idea, fine, you get that.
Oh, that was Barr.
But that Trump is saying, how in the world would Robert Redfield know anything at all about vaccine and pandemic policy?
He's an actor. From the movies, Robert Redfield. I know, he won all the Oscars and everything. I'm sure he's thinking that.
Yeah. So
This
really,
guy right here, sir. Oh.
Okay. So let me give you the Jake Sherman thing.
Yeah.
Because I won't be leaving that early. We got plenty of time for this.
Aha.
It takes us where it takes us, but gives you an idea of how the media just gets so in the bubble that everybody outside just scratches their head and say, what are you guys talking about? So Jake Sherman, playbook this AM, the Pelosi bailout plan.
What?
Airlines are struggling to get their bailout. Cities and states are waiting for their cash. Businesses, small and large, could use another round of the Paycheck Protection Program. Help isn't on the way right now. The only person Republicans are bailing out is Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Okay, follow through this logic here. Down and out, under withering criticism, pinned on the mat in the wrestling match of internal House politics, Pelosi has been thrown lifeline after lifeline by Republicans. It helps illustrate unusual rhythms of internal politics and the strategic discord that can plague one party. Okay, and she's actually
still not.
It's not clear which party he's referring to here.
Yeah.
On Wednesday morning, the clutch of middle-of-the-road Democrats who made Pelosi Speaker suggested her strategy in the COVID relief negotiation wasn't working. Change course, they urged, to help break the months-long logjam. There was a rare wave of on-the-record discontent with Pelosi, who typically rules her caucus with an iron fist. With talks on ice and Congress on the brink of leaving town, her leadership team started to mull whether they should schedule a series of votes to quell the uprising. But
listen to our
in
show.
swooped President Trump, suggesting he wanted a giant relief deal, just like Pelosi, and against the wishes of all senior Republicans, almost all senior Republicans. And this immediately turned the questioning on the GOP. Reporters began asking whether R supported the president's position. They didn't. But if Trump wanted a big deal, why would Pelosi take the floor with a small deal? It was now up to R's to execute for their president. Now notice, none of this changed anything whatsoever about what was actually going on in Washington in terms of the policy. What it changed is reporters now ran to the other party to start asking. Instead of badgering Pelosi and having people like Jim Cramer say, Nancy, crazy Nancy, what are you doing? Incredibly disrespectful. And the idea that Pelosi somehow doesn't know what she's doing just infuses all of this. It's incredible. But really, the important thing is now the reporters went and asked the Republicans what they thought.
Yeah.
Because they weren't doing that before. It's all on the Democrats.
They were about
right?
to
It's all
throw
Democrats
right
in disarray. How come why isn't Joe Biden doing a mask mandate for everybody? It's the same stuff. It's right here. And but it gets worse. This immediately turned the question on the GOP. By Wednesday evening, with the attention shifting back to Pelosi, by who? Not the public, the reporters. By Wednesday evening, with the attention shifting back to Pelosi, our colleagues scooped that Republicans were considering forcing a quixotic vote on tossing Pelosi out of the speakership.
I think I learned that once.
It's a measure that would be sure to fail, but it would serve to unify House Democrats around the speaker in the middle of the pandemic. Democrats were already asking, who is thinking about stuff like this when thousands of Americans are dying? Rarely in Washington, he says, does a leader get so lucky, as if everything Pelosi does is luck.
Okay.
Right? Pelosi's far from a perfect pol. In fact, there's no such thing. But her adversaries in the White House and on Capitol Hill seem to be unable or unwilling to let her flail.
In this case, wow.
All right. It's pretty amazing, but it's entirely from the focus of, look, the Democrats were going to fail, but how are the Republicans allowing them back in the game? That is the entire point of view of this. And the other day he had a similar one and said, look, I'm just reporting what's going on. Stop yelling at me. But obviously if Pelosi wanted to succeed, what she'd do is listen to her moderates and allow them to write the legislation. Right? It's like, I don't have an opinion. I'm just giving you my opinion.
Yeah. Well,
maybe that's the wrong opinion. Maybe Pelosi actually does know what she's talking about.
Yeah.
Maybe taking the harder line position is actually the right political thing to do, not just the right policy thing to do. Maybe. But that's not even in the work. No, that can't be. It's got to be that the moderates with a lot less experience in doing this know what they're doing. And Pelosi, who's been there for a while, not her first rodeo, and remember what happened and how she held the line on getting Obamacare passed in the first place.
Yeah.
Maybe she doesn't know what she's doing, and she should listen to her freshman moderates.
Well, it's not without precedent, although it's usually...
It's not without merit, but the whole tone is, well, of course that's right, and there can't be any other explanation.
Yes, that's true. Interesting. I wonder if she ever had any thought in her mind about, give them 15 minutes. I bet the Republicans will screw this up. Hold on a second. I don't know. I don't know if that was easy to anticipate. I mean, the way they came out of the box saying they would hold a vote to elect a new speaker in the middle of this Congress, knowing that they can't get anything like that even on the floor. They don't have a majority. I don't know how that even became their strategy. I guess that's just, let's just do something. And it's addressed here in the thing that it has no hope of winning. Why would anybody think about doing that in the middle of a pandemic? And I guess if you are of the mind, if you are one of those true believers who believes the reason we don't have a mask mandate is Joe Biden, and the reason that the pandemic is going poorly is Democrats, then I guess you're going to want to hold that vote.
Or if you're Mark Meadows and think of course, somebody like Robert Redfield, head of the CDC, would have no idea about what's going on with pandemic stuff. Yes. Why would he? He's not a political
That's what's in their heads. Wow. Okay.
He's not on Jared's team.
No. He might be on performance.
Only Jared's team knows what's going on. It's just amazing. But that the reporters just buy into all that stuff is even more amazing.
Yeah, well, that's their job, I guess. I don't know.
Well, for another day, but there's this excellent, have they learned nothing from 2016? And here's a perfect example of no, they haven't.
I guess not. That's beginning to become a major theme in the writing these days. And I guess we will save that for another day. Okay, well, why don't you go vote, or get ready to vote, rather, and
or pre-vote, or whatever it is it's called, and I'll talk to you on Monday.
Okay, very good.
I'm only doing this once.
All right, see you then. Good luck. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's see. Not even certain which direction we'll choose to go in. I did see flashing across the screen here, though, and as we were talking vaccine logistics, here's another mistake in vaccine logistics. Chief of Staff Mark Meadows says the White House is aiming to have 100 million doses of coronavirus vaccine ready to go by the end of October. Now, they don't actually have a vaccine or any doses of it. And as I was pointing out, they don't even have 100 million vials to put the doses of vaccine in. So how are you going to get it ready to go? Ready to go meaning what? I don't know. At the end of October. It's ready for curbside pickup. We have a tanker truck full of vaccine. All you have to do is come in and grab a hypodermic needle and dip it in the hole at the top and suck in some vaccine and jab yourself with it, and you're covered. So that's the plan. Mark Knoller, I guess, uncritically transcribing that from Mark Meadows. I thought he was on his way out, Mark Knoller. Not yet, though. Number of days during which I thought Mark Knoller either was retired or fired, but he hasn't been. One. That's the way Mark Knoller likes it. He loves the quantitative reporting and keeping tabs on things like this. He says, Mark Meadows says they're going to have 100 million doses ready to go by the end of October for trick or treat, I guess. Says goal is to make the most vulnerable and highest risk people. Goal is to make here's what it says. Says goal is to make the most vulnerable and highest risk people. I guess make sure the most vulnerable and highest risk people are vaccinated in that first group. So this might be a vaccine, it might be bleach, it might work, it might not work, it could be rat poison, we don't have enough needles, let's share them, whatever. That will all go to the most vulnerable and highest risk people. So we will have, I guess this is the end of October, let's say 650 million dead by Election Day. How about that? Why not predict that? And let's buy some Spanish language radio on that one and see if it works. It says, the tweet continues, that Mark Meadows says up to 300 million doses would be ready in January. So 100 million by the end of October, and then in January. I guess that could be the end of January. So October to end of November, December, January. 3 months, hence, they would have another 300 million doses. That would make 400 million doses. That's more people than there are in the United States of America by several tens of millions. And so the rest would be, I guess they probably, let's see. Maybe they'll distribute it by income. And for every $1 billion you have, you get an extra dose. And maybe that'll, I don't know what. Anyway, I don't see how they make 300 million. They have to manufacture another 100 million doses a month between October and January. And like I said, they don't even have the little vials to put these things in. So last we checked in, there was a significant shortage. They were trying to kick up production on the vials and the needles. But the Trump administration was in charge of that. So did it get done? Yeah, well, you'll find out. Well, you won't find out at the end of October because there's not going to be 100 million doses of coronavirus vaccine because they won't even have approved one by then. So whatever. Or I guess they're telegraphing their plans to just approve some kind of juice in a bottle and say it's the coronavirus vaccine. Fingers crossed that that the material that they decide to distribute is benign and neutral and won't hurt anybody. Let it be saline solution or something like that so that we don't all die from the fake vaccine. All right. Well, that's interesting. Where to go? I don't know. The rest of the news is, well, it's crazy, as you know. There's a late breaking, I think, brand new accusation of sexual assault against the president of the United States. That's Donald Trump, allegedly. And this one, I don't know. I felt like we might have seen this one before, but maybe it's just that we've seen, 36 sexual assault accusations against Donald Trump, and we haven't seen this one before. It rings some bells, but I know maybe I've seen other details about it. This one, without going too far into it, and I guess here, sexual assault trigger warning. I don't plan on reading the whole article, but I guess it's out there, and you should be aware of it. And if these things disturb you, I'm probably going to give like a couple of minutes to just registering that this has happened. Donald Trump accused of sexual assault by former model Amy Dorris, Dorris. This an exclusive report in The Guardian. So I guess that means it's brand new. And without getting into too much detail about it, it sounds like he kissed her and groped her at the 1997 U.S. Open. And I think we're talking about the tennis Open here, not the golf Open. Yes, tennis Open, of course, that taking place in New York. And so Donald Trump buys a super fancy box to go there and molest women in that box. And it rang a bell to me because I've seen pictures of him at the U.S. Open before. And just as I said, he buys or mooches off of somebody else access to one of the rich person boxes where they have indoor space for you to retreat to and drink and molest your guests. And I've seen photos of him at said event, not the 1997 Open, but the later Open, where he's with the Clintons, as a matter of fact. So I thought perhaps that was the same time, but this was in September of 1997. So without going into too much detail, Lucy Osborne, the writer on this one, I'll let her give you the basics. A former model has come forward, and it is a little late at this stage. Not like I don't believe it. I'm just curious as to why. Maybe she just was getting her head together to own up to this, or thought that joining a pack of people making such accusations was somehow less credible. I'm not certain what her reasoning is, but I'd have a hard time discounting it at this stage of the game. So it might be strategically wise to have done this. A former model has come forward to accuse Donald Trump of sexually assaulting her at the U.S. Open tennis tournament more than 2 decades ago in an alleged incident that left her feeling sick and violated. That's the way it goes with sexual assault, so checks out so far. In an exclusive interview with The Guardian, Amy Dorris alleged that Trump accosted her outside the bathroom in his VIP box at the tournament in New York on, they're British, 5 September, the 5th of September, 1997. Doris, who was 24 at the time, I don't know how old Trump was, but you can do the math, accuses Trump of, kissing her and groping her. The language that she uses here is forcing his tongue down her throat, which is just sort of disturbing altogether. But, just the phrasing is disturbing, but that it happened is the worst part. Assaulting her all over her body and holding her in a grip she was unable to escape from. Now, he'll take pride in that, by the way. And, all right, he's kissing her and groping her. She says, I was pushing him off, and that's when his grip became tighter and his hands were very gropey and, all over the place. And you can imagine what that's all about. She couldn't escape. Let's see. She currently lives in Florida. It makes her a Florida voter, so I guess we know how that's going. She provided the Guardian with evidence to support her account of the encounters with Trump, at least with the encounter, that she was there. That is, photographs, I guess, because I see one appearing here, including her ticket to the U.S. Open and 6 photos showing her with the real estate magnate over several days in New York. And here's the answer. Trump was 51 at the time and married to his second wife, Marla Maples. So, doesn't matter that he was married because he doesn't take those things seriously. He's doing this all the time with everybody. Her account was also corroborated by several people she confided in about the incident, so there was that. She did tell people. There will be people who say, why didn't she say anything for over 20 years? Well, she did. So there you go. That's the answer. They include a friend in New York and Doris's mother, both of whom she called immediately after the alleged incident, as well as a therapist and friends she spoke to in the years since. All said Doris has shared with them the details of the alleged incident that matched what she later told The Guardian. Doris, now 48 and a mother to 2 twin daughters, said she had considered speaking publicly about the incident in 2016. Here's all the answers. When several women made public similar accusations, get it, against the then Republican candidate for president, but she decided against coming forward in part because she thought that doing so might harm her family. Now I feel like my girls are about to turn 13 years old, and I want them to know that you don't let anybody do anything to you that you don't want, she said. And I'd rather be a role model. I want them to see that I didn't stay quiet, that I stood up to somebody who did something that was unacceptable. And meanwhile, Donald Trump is probably thinking, she has 13-year-old twin girls, eh? Let's see. There's a little pull-out quote here over on the sidebar. It felt like tentacles. The women who accused Trump of sexual misconduct. I guess hands everywhere. Let's see. She says here she spent several days with Trump in September of 1997 after being taken to New York for a long weekend by her then boyfriend, Jason Bin. I don't know who that is, but he appears in one of the photos here. At the time, Doris was living with friends in Boca Raton, Florida, regularly traveling to Miami for modeling and occasional acting work. Bin, the founder of several luxury fashion and lifestyle magazines, was a friend of Trump, of course. In 1999, he reportedly described the real estate businessman as his best friend. Oh my goodness, you're a sick individual. Fell right into that trap. On Friday, September 5th, Doris and Bin took her to meet Trump at his office in Trump Tower. How smarmy. Before they went together to the U.S. Open in Queens. He came on strong, very strong, right away, Doris said of Trump. It seemed, It seemed typical of a certain guy, people who just feel like they're entitled to do what they want, even though I was there with my boyfriend. That never stops him, of course. And we've heard similar stories before. Let's see. Any other important details jumping straight out at me here? Not really. You're certainly welcome to take a look at the rest. Oh, let's see. Some cheesy details later on. The day after the alleged assault, Doris and Bin returned to Trump's box at the U.S. Open. Doris said she decided to wear a conservative outfit of khakis, a blue knit sweater, and loafers in an effort to discourage further advances from Trump. I don't know if he really cares what they're wearing. I guess here's the picture of it here. Or is this it? Is that the sweater or something else? I don't know. It's a blue top, but it's sleeveless, so I don't know. There's the khakis. The couple stopped off at Trump's apartment in Trump Tower on the way. And here, you wonder, obviously there's some sort of not really particularly healthy, stable dynamics between her and her boyfriend here. Why she says, let's not go there. There's so much to do in New York. Why can't we go somewhere else? You go where he takes you, and she wasn't really in control of the relationship, I guess. Anyway, the couple stops off at Trump's apartment in Trump Tower on the way, where they posed for photographs with celebrities who were also visiting the real estate tycoon before attending the tennis, including the musicians Lenny Kravitz and Sean Combs, a.k.a. Puff Daddy. So here's that picture of them. I don't know. There's a face blurred out, whoever's with Lenny Kravitz here, but I guess back in the days when it was safe to be seen, sort of, kind of, with Donald Trump, it doesn't surprise me that more celebrities, although why they all stop off in the ridiculous lobby of outside of his apartment, the gilded lobby and the landing of his penthouse, is beyond me. But that was the 90s for you, and I guess you can understand that. Again, her boyfriend's job was publishing some of those very, very popular genre at the time, luxury lifestyle magazines, sort of a holdover, a print version of Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous, where it would make sense that Donald Trump's smarmy, over-decorated lifestyle would be a big part of what those kinds of publications and TV shows were about. He sort of lived for Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous, did Donald Trump, and I guess everybody else did too. Let's see. Oh, look at this. She says Trump continued to pursue her. The conservative outfit didn't fix things. Asking such questions such as, could you see yourself living here? It didn't matter that I changed my clothes. I guess that's kind of an important message, right? So for the what was she wearing crowd, it doesn't matter. It was still the same situation. She said, I didn't feel like myself that second day at all. I did feel like something was taken away. Later, they were joined in Trump's box by more VIP guests, and I got to tell you, the trouble's just getting worse, including Leonardo DiCaprio, that's not who you want to add to the situation, and the illusionist David Blaine, with whom they posed for photographs. And there's also one other person's face blurred out here. DiCaprio, Blaine, Kravitz, and Combs did not respond to requests for comment. Does it get any worse? 2 days later, on September 8th, Dora said she attended a memorial service for Gianni Versace with Bin and Trump. They're just jet-setting it all over the place. Asked why she continued to spend time with Bin and Trump, Bin is the better question, in the days after the alleged assault, Dora said, I was there from Florida, and I was with Jason. I had no money, nowhere to go. We were going from event to event, and it was overwhelming. She did not fully process what had happened until later. People spend years around people who have abused them. That's what happens when something traumatic happens. You freeze. And I've certainly heard similar things before. Let's see. Trump, lawyers, blah, 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 deny it. There couldn't possibly have been inappropriate behavior outside the bathrooms in the VIP box. There would have been numerous witnesses, maybe, if everybody went to the bathroom in a group. But I don't think so. All right. I think we'll drop it at this point. Just sort of wanted to make note that it was out there. I at this point, I guess it makes no difference. Add it to the pile, except for the fact that, there's a human being involved, and I thought I might convey her story. I'm not the candidate for doing it the most justice, just noting that it's out there. All right. Let's see. Another sampling of items from around the pot. Why not go over here to the article that Brian Monroe sent us? He said he did chime in earlier in today's show when I mentioned that he had sent me this article and I meant to read it. He says, always looking for a way to get on the payroll at KITM headquarters. So we'll let you earn your share of today's zero pay. Why not? Although one day we could create something that more closely resembles a payroll here. I suppose it's entirely possible if we ever grow our Patreon subscription base to such a size that we can start distributing some of it. There's lots I could have people doing here. And we could even build a studio where you wouldn't hear all the breakfasting in the background, even during a pandemic lockdown. By the way, a special note on today's show for Gil, just letting you know, I love. The homey touches that we have around here. I know others have commented, it makes me feel like we're doing an interview we're doing the news media interviews in local diners when everybody is eating breakfast in the background, and you can hear the clacking of the spoons and the bowls and the dishes and silverware clinking. One of our good friends and constant companions in listening and communicating, Gil, tells us, he asked me, who's always opening soda cans? Or, I guess he thought it was maybe like a morning Monster energy drink can or something like that in the background. And so now that's sort of a signal for the show. So now we are exaggerating the sound of this thing. And every time it's my wife's Coke in the morning that she's opening up, and every time it opens, I think Gil's ears are pricking up. There it is, the can opening. So now you can all share in this, and it'll make the background noise just that much more endearing and easy to endure. Anyway, on to the article that Brian sent to me. I thought it was so familiar to me when he sent it, and it was in Pocket, and I couldn't decide whether I had already read the thing, but I think I read it on, is this from Monday, the 14th, or was that, let's see, today's 15, 16 was Wednesday. Yeah, Monday. I think I read it like just before air and figured, I'm definitely going to read this on the air, and then I didn't. So it's a familiar piece. Jeffrey Skelly writes I think a scary-ish piece. What if Trump loses and won't leave? We've talked about this subject quite a lot, and it's the subject of a lot of discussion, but I thought, as Brian did, this one covered some interesting angles on what could come up. And they're covering basically some of the simulations that they've run about what do they think would happen in these things. And we've heard about those. This is probably a new one, and I thought this one got a little bit more detailed and interesting. For months now, President Trump has carefully planted the seeds that he might not leave the office of the presidency willingly if he loses. Whether it's tweeting that the election should be delayed as it, quote, will be the most inaccurate and fraudulent election in history, or that there will be widespread voter fraud because of the expected uptick in mail ballots due to the coronavirus, Trump seems intent on undermining the electoral process. This, in turn, raises another thorny and unprecedented question. What happens if Trump won't go? The answer is bleak. Experts tell me that the president actually has a lot of power at his discretion to contest the election. And some of the scenarios that could bring us to the edge of a crisis are actually very plausible. And I liked this article because it addresses, it starts out on the premise of what if Trump won't go? But this one begins by explaining, well, what do you mean won't go? Like, by what mechanism would he be able to sit there and say, besides, this one is always available to him, and Trump, more than anyone else, would be likely to just say, no, I'm not leaving. You're going to have to carry me out of here. And he's very heavy. So that might really work. But this actually explores some of this scenario, and that's what I thought made this one interesting. Consider this one. It's late on Election Day, and hundreds of thousands of votes in key battleground states still have to be counted due to the increased use of mail and absentee voting because of the pandemic. Now, this runs counter to Armando's theory that because Florida actually starts counting mail-in ballots before Election Day and therefore is ready to announce its results generally speaking, on Election Day, famously effed that up in 2000, but you know that story, that they would probably be able to give the news organizations a pretty good idea of what the real outcome of the electoral vote count is going to be because they hold so many electoral votes. And this could render some of Trump's plans to highlight any remaining confusion moot. But setting that aside, late on Election Day, hundreds of thousands of votes in key battleground states still to be counted because of the reliance on mail and absentee voting. As a result, media outlets have largely avoided calling the race. We don't want to be biased. We don't want to be unfair. As soon as we call the race for Biden, they're going to say we're cheating, blah, blah, blah. Let's stay out of it. But based on the votes that have been counted, that is, votes cast on Election Day and tabulated by machines, right? Trump leads in enough states to reach at least 270 electoral votes, which would be enough to win the election if his election night lead holds. Trump claims victory, as he almost certainly would, but Because Democrats were much more likely to vote by mail than Republicans this year, Joe Biden eventually pulls ahead because of the Democratic lean of the remaining votes, a phenomenon known as the, quote, blue shift. Don't worry about the phenomenon. Don't worry about the name. It's a phenomenon known as finishing counting the votes. And by the way, and you should keep that in mind because, of course, that'll be key to the rhetoric post-election as Republicans say this is just an attempt to try to discover, quote-unquote, discover votes that were locked in trunks somewhere and whatever they need to drag out in order to cheat to win. But it's called counting all the votes. That's just one of the many scenarios. The Transition Integrity Project, a bipartisan collection of over 100 experts, explored this summer while researching how a possible election crisis could unfold. Rosa Brooks, a professor at Georgetown University Law School who co-founded the Transition Integrity Project, told me she and her colleagues weren't interested in predicting the likelihood of any one scenario they looked at, but more so in understanding the range of possibilities. Sounds like a good focus. Ultimately, they don't know to what extent this year's election result will be contested. Would Trump deploy federal agents from the Department of Justice to secure vote counting sites, like the new Brooks Brothers riot? Or would he just take to Twitter to bemoan the results? There's a range of possibilities here. But Brooks told me they do think the election will be contested at least some level. So the question they're asking is how much? One big takeaway from the Transition Integrity Project simulations was just how much power Trump has at his disposal, because we think he's president, should he choose to contest the election. You just have a tremendous differential between the President of the United States of America, who has awesome coercive powers at his disposal, and the challenger, who really has no power whatsoever in our system, except for mask mandates nationally. Joe Biden can call a press conference. Donald Trump can call on the 82nd Airborne, theoretically. This, of course, would be a doomsday scenario, and one reason why so much of this is hard to fathom. A cornerstone of American elections has been the peaceful transition of power, but as research from the Transition Integrity Project and others underscores, there are multiple ways to contest an election, and it's not limited to just Trump either. It's very possible, were Trump to actually win in the Electoral College, where he has an advantage, but lose the popular vote to Biden, Democrats could dismiss the election as unfair. We, of course, do not have to look too far back in our electoral history to know that Americans have survived a disputed election before. See the 2000 presidential race, at least. But experts I talked to, not me, but the writer here, were worried, given Trump's inflammatory rhetoric around the election and his own track record of openly flouting democratic norms, that the country wouldn't be able to handle another full-throttle election dispute. Take how low the public's trust in the election already is. Last week, an NBC News SurveyMonkey poll found that 59% of Americans were not too confident, or not confident at all, that the election would be conducted in a free and equal way. That's a lot, 60% almost, in line with its polling since early August on this question. It might be hard to remember now, but in the 2000 presidential election, Florida's Republican-controlled state legislature was on the verge of appointing a new slate of electors to vote for George W. Bush, had a court-ordered manual recount imposed by the Florida Supreme Court dragged on. Of course, it ultimately didn't come to that because the U.S. Supreme Court stepped in and halted Florida's recount, famously deciding in a 5-4 decision that the state Supreme Court had overstepped its bounds and that a recount could not be held in time to meet the federal deadline for the selection of presidential electors. Edward Foley of Ohio State University's Moritz College of Law thinks something similar could happen this year if the president and his backers contest the results of the Electoral College. In Foley's scenario, Trump leads in the tipping point state of Pennsylvania on election night. We'll set this up just before we leave for the break. But because of Democratic gains in ballots counted in the following days, Biden pulls ahead by a few thousand votes. What happens next quickly devolves into a partisan dispute. You ready for it? Democratic Governor Tom Wolf signs Pennsylvania's Certificate of Ascertainment. That's what usually goes on to the Congress to be counted in the electoral vote count, confirming Biden's victory by listing the Democratic electors as the state's official slate for the Electoral College, while the Republican-controlled Pennsylvania legislature appoints a different set of electors. At Trump's behest, as he claimed, there was widespread election fraud. What to do? That's some scenario. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday, but our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning show here on Netroots Radio. Okay, where we left off. Oh, look, we have a new comment has come in just at the moment here. What were we talking about that we got to this? Yes. Right, we were talking about Mark Knoller and his coverage of Meadows' comment about having 100 million doses and that they won't even have the vials. Let's see, David Wright commenting, I didn't think any of the vaccines have even completed their first round of testing yet, but Ed Bott, who's I guess not a bot, but just has that funny name that's always going to make trouble for him, a tech journalist and a verified kind of guy, says, yeah, funny thing about that. And of course, Knoller, who is pretty much a stenographer, just reports these audacious lies without any context. I think he probably did report that without any context. I didn't look around to see whether he reported any context. It wouldn't surprise me that he didn't. He just sort of does. He just sort of thinks of himself as an on-the-spot reporter who just tells you what people are walking around saying, and we weigh it later. And I don't know if I agree with that school of journalism, or I don't know if he would agree that that's his school of journalism either. But yeah, okay, it's out there. Just thought I would point that out and what people are talking about. Let's see. We left off from this scary article about one of the Transition Integrity Project's idea about what might happen if Trump refused to leave office. And this scenario unfolded in Pennsylvania to start. To recap here, on election night, the votes cast that day in Pennsylvania appear to indicate that Donald Trump wins Pennsylvania. But once the absentee ballots and mail-in ballots are counted, Biden pulls ahead by a few thousand votes. They finish up all the counting. It's not that they've run out of time. They've now counted every ballot, and Biden appears to have won. The Democratic governor, Tom Wolf, will sign, as usually is the case, Pennsylvania's Certificate of Ascertainment. It's interesting that it's linked in this. I guess this goes to the Constitution Center's piece called Why Certificates of Ascertainment Are Critical in the 2016 Presidential Election. I'm not certain why they were particularly critical in that election, but now I feel like reading it. But anyway, that's what ends up happening. And typically, as I was explaining the Electoral College to who were we explaining this to? Oh yeah, Ricky in Canada was asking about this. I still don't get this thing here. Why do you do it? Ultimately, the answer turned out to be because we're very dumb here, and we adopted a stupid system that's contrary to the way that we actually elect presidents these days, or at least the way we think about it. It turns out the mechanics were understood. It was, well, yes, I understand how you do it, just why. We're dumb. Well, anyway, the way it works, essentially, you win the popular vote in Pennsylvania, and some recognized authority has to be the one to send the certificate of ascertainment. That is to say, here are our electoral votes, and they are cast by these people. These people are selected to represent the Electoral College for Pennsylvania by virtue of this candidate having won the popular vote here. That is the system that we've adopted. Now, remember, though, that's the system that we have because the Constitution hands to each of the state legislatures the constitutional right and duty to determine that state's method of selecting electors for the Electoral College. The Constitution says you're going to have a vote of an Electoral College, and the Electoral College will have this many people in it, and this is how you determine how many each state has, and this is what they do once they're elected to the Electoral College. They have to meet at this time and cast their votes, and then they wrap it all up in a certify that these are our votes. That's signed by the competent authority in the state. In Pennsylvania, that's the governor. In most states, it's the governor. You certify these were our electoral votes. Send that in vague terms, send that to Washington, D.C., where the votes get counted by Congress. What does it really mean? You send it to the President of the Senate. That, of course, is the currently serving Vice President of the United States. That would be Mike Pence. You can already see where that problem leads. You send those votes to the President of the Senate, and then in a joint session of Congress, the votes are opened, read aloud by the clerk, who also lets everybody know that the certificate of ascertainment is good, and everything appears to be regular and in order, as they say, and then they tally up the votes, and then they announce who won, even though, we've already figured that out and the news has told us, but just to do the mechanics of it, to make sure everything goes right, the president and vice president are elected. So here's the problem, right? Normally, Governor Tom Wolf would sign the certificate of ascertainment that goes along with the votes. It would be opened up in the joint session that the clerk would read and say everything appears to be in order here, and these are Pennsylvania's electoral votes. Because of the dynamics of the way the vote gets counted, right? On election day, it looks like Trump is ahead. He declares victory, but then all the votes are counted and Biden has the victory, and Republicans are mad. And they say, what can we do about it? Normally they say nothing. We lost the election in Pennsylvania, and that's that. We'll just be sad and try to sabotage the Biden presidency is what they would normally say. But instead, what if the state legislature says, hey, there's this part in the Constitution here that says the state legislature determines how the state's electoral votes will be determined and cast. What is this stupid governor doing using the system that we established before we found out that we got screwed, trying to certify Biden electors when the current mood of the Republican legislature is, no, we want a totally new system that we can adopt right here, right now, because we have the votes. And we say Donald Trump won, and therefore Donald Trump's chosen electors will represent Pennsylvania in the Electoral College. The governor says, screw you, I'm signing this thing. And the legislature says, well, double screw you. We're going to sign a different thing and send that. And the governor says, they'll never listen to you. You're just the legislature. They always have been listening to the governor for these couple hundred years that we've been doing this. And they say, remember, these things are being sent to the president of the Senate. That's Mike Pence. We're going to include a letter that says, Wolf's certificate of ascertainment sucks, and ours is the best. And which one of us do you think he'll believe? And that's where the question lies. It's that simple, but it's also that complicated, depending on how you look at it, right? Some people will think, gosh, that's so convoluted and difficult to explain. And other people will say, no, it's the easiest thing in the world. The Republicans lose, but they don't want to lose. They want to win. So they just declare themselves the winner and send a separate letter that says, screw those guys, we're the winners. And they hope that because the letters are being received by another Republican, that Republican will read them and say, yeah, the Republicans say, screw the Democrat, he's a loser and he's lying. The Democrat says we did the vote the regular way with all the normal stuff, and it just turns out that Biden won. You can't believe that. Everybody knows Trump is going to win this election. He's the most popular president ever. We should put him on Mount Rushmore. So what does that guy do with the two letters? One from a Democrat who he hates because he's a Democrat that says a Democrat won, and one from the Republicans who he loves because he's a Republican that says the Republican won. He's going to decide that the Republican won. Now, does he have the power to decide that? That doesn't come up until later. So to continue with the article, this, were it to happen, would likely be met immediately with legal challenges in state and federal court. Yeah, sure. Perhaps followed by another intervention by the U.S. Supreme Court. But the significance is that even if a court ruled against the validity of one set of electors, Congress still has the power to consider both sets of electors as long as they have in hand the certificate naming them. So if the court, any court, Pennsylvania Supreme Court, U.S. Supreme Court, says, no, we've considered the merits of this thing, and sorry, as sad as we are about this, you're just going to have to accept that Biden won Pennsylvania and that the governor's certification of Pennsylvania's electoral votes is the one you have to keep. Now, of course, the Supreme Court could decide to beat up all the Democrats on the democratically nominated, let's say, the ones nominated by Democrats on the Supreme Court, beat them all up, tie them up, and throw them in the basketball court above the courtroom. And we don't know where they are, so it's 5-0, or 4-0 somehow for Republicans, or however many it is now these days. And that's that. Or they could get outvoted, or they could decide in favor of Biden somehow. But what they're saying here is Congress still says, the Constitution actually leaves this to us. Now, of course, the courts may also say, we have also read the Constitution because we know that we consider this to be a political question and we're going to punt on this thing. We're not going to touch it. Let the Congress settle it. So what does that even mean? And how would they settle it? No one's entirely sure. But we'll continue on here. As we said, the significance here is that even if a court rules one way or the other, Congress still has the power to consider both sets of electors as long as they have the certificates, whether they're valid or not, in hand. So, the Electoral Count Act of 1887, which governs the electoral vote counting process, was designed, believe it or not, to help Congress decide how to handle such a situation. But it is especially ambiguous on what would happen if the Senate and House disagree on which set of electors should count, which could happen if the Republicans retain control in the Senate and Democrats keep the House. Right? This is pretty dumb, isn't it? The Electoral Count of 1887, designed to handle this, doesn't handle it. Why not? Because it says something as stupid and vague as, well, even if the courts say one set of electors is valid or invalid, Congress still has the power to consider both sets of electors and make the decision. Right. So what's that mean? What do you mean? What's that mean? Congress will decide. Okay, how? Well, they'll vote. Okay, but how? Like as a joint session? No, they don't vote that way. So they'll split back up, and the Senate will go back to the Senate, and the House will stay in the House chamber, and they'll vote. And the House, because it's controlled by Democrats, will say, we think the governor's certificate saying Biden won is the one we should consider. And over in the Senate, they'll say, well, we think that the Republican one from the legislature saying that Trump won Pennsylvania is the one we should consider. And then what? Go to conference? That's not going to work anything out, right? So what do? In Foley's scenario, Vice President Mike Pence, as president of the Senate, would oversee the count in Congress. That's in everybody's scenario because that's how it works. But in Foley's scenario, Vice President Mike Pence follows one interpretation of the law, arguing that neither set of electors, this is another interesting one, I didn't think about this one, neither set of electors should count because they conflict. And then everybody would say, wow, that's even-handed, right? He's not going to, it would be illegitimate. Let's say it's be viewed, and let's say one norm of American political behavior remains, and people say, we're not going to accept the idea that the Republican Senate says Trump wins Pennsylvania, and because Pence is a Republican, he accepts that instead of what the much more numerous Democrats in the House say, or despite whatever the courts say, or anything like that. We would, I don't know, rise up in revolt. They wouldn't, but let's say he thinks that they will. So instead, someone slips him a note. Why don't you be the peacemaker in this and take this sort of conciliatory approach? All right. Well, you say the Republicans won. And I like you guys, but you say the Democrats won. And I respect you, even if I don't get along with you all that well. But to show you how fair and even-handed I'm going to be, neither of you win. Except that's just a backdoor way of getting around to Republicans win, as is illustrated here. So, in Foley's scenario, Pence says, fine, neither set counts because they conflict. That removes Pennsylvania's votes from the total number of electors, the 538 we're always talking about, leaving just 518 electoral votes on the table. And in this scenario, what if Trump has a majority of that 518 remaining electoral votes, and the effect in the end of removing Pennsylvania's vote is just to lock in a Republican win by another means, right? Democrats at this point, of course, counter, claiming that the certificate bearing the governor's seal, which supports Biden, is given preference by law. Not that, well, it's fair to throw both out. There's a real legal answer to this, and it goes to weighting it in favor of the one signed by the governor. Ultimately, though, neither side in this scenario finds a compromise, and we find ourselves in the midst of a full-blown constitutional crisis. In this scenario, the Supreme Court could become involved if, for instance, Democrats seek an injunction to stop Pence from not counting Pennsylvania's votes. But it's also possible that the court would try to avoid making a ruling on the counting dispute, in keeping with a dissent from Bush v. Gore that argued neither the Constitution nor the Electoral Count Act provided a role for the judiciary in this process. It's another way of saying, yeah, that's a political question, and we're going to duck the issue. Under the 20th Amendment, and interesting that they would take it from dissent in Bush v. Gore, not the majority opinion, but a dissent. Under the 20th Amendment, we know someone must take office on January 20th as president. Yet the amendment is curiously silent on how to deal with a dispute over whether someone has actually qualified to take office. The thing that we know for sure is that the current term ends, said Foley. But, he added, that doesn't mean it would be straightforward to figure out who should take office next if there's a disagreement. And even that probably assumes too much. Yes, it's clear under the Constitution that the term ends, but so what? I mean, Trump might find it valuable to say, no, it doesn't say that. Everybody knows it says the opposite, and just see how long that lasts. But if we don't get that, or it plays out too quickly, you still have a problem. Who becomes president? In fact, as you might have guessed already, it's possible that House Speaker Nancy Pelosi could claim that under the Presidential Succession Act. She is next in line to become president after the vice president, who would no longer be the vice president, of course, if Inauguration Day rolls around and they haven't settled things. So she'd be next in line to become president, and that she announces she would be willing to resign her House seat to serve as president, which would be required, until Biden is ruled the election winner, or whatever. But if Republicans claimed Trump had won re-election, they very well might object to Pelosi being the one who gets sworn in. Given a crisis of this scale, it's hard to unpack exactly what might happen next, but it's very likely things would spiral out of control, and the resulting uncertainty could spark unrest and protests that could very well lead to violence. And I guess the step that's skipped here is explaining, yeah, Pelosi would be next under the Presidential Succession Act. How would Republicans invalidate that? They wouldn't, really. They would just say, well, who cares? Pelosi's crazy and we hate her guts and nobody's going to accept this. Everybody knows Trump won. And if the result of Trump's win is Democrats just put their fingers in their ears and say, no, la, la, I can't hear you until Pelosi becomes acting president, that's no solution. That's a coup. And then they send out their militias and beat everybody up and shoot at people. and we are where we are. It is what it is, Trump might say. Gaming out these different scenarios demonstrates that should Trump dispute the result, a key factor will be the extent to which leading Republican officials at the federal and state levels cooperate with him. So far, that's not looking too good for anybody. Brooks pointed out that while Trump has significant power to contest the results as president, he can ultimately only go so far if supporters don't follow his lead. For instance, in one of the simulations, the Transition Integrity Project found that GOP leaders might support some of Trump's claims of fraud or maneuvers to manipulate the vote count, but that didn't necessarily mean they'd go along with every move he tried. For instance, it found many Republicans, based on what? It was guessing, that many Republicans might oppose an attempt to federalize and deploy the National Guard. And in Foley's scenario, much hinged on what Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and other Republicans, including Pence, chose to do when it came to deciding which Pennsylvania electors should count. So they may go a different direction in all this. They might just try to muscle it through and say, we'll count the Republican ones. And if Democrats were protesting in the streets about it and Bill Barr declared that that meant it was an insurrection and that everyone protesting was guilty of sedition and that they were going to mobilize the National Guard or just send out the regular army to tear gas, heat ray, or otherwise torture American protesters in all of this and just call it an insurrection, it comes down at some level to, does anybody obey that order? So we don't know if we have an answer to that yet. The relative closeness of the election is a factor here, too. The article continues. In a different simulation, the Transition Integrity Project looked at that, a different one that they looked at that put Biden in a stronger position on election night. Trump attracted less support from Republican leaders in that scenario, and Biden's campaign was able to get some degree of bipartisan cooperation so that the country didn't slide into a full-blown electoral crisis. I mean, it's possible, but sometimes we would think a bit of a long shot. Still, throughout its different scenarios, the project found it likely that the Trump campaign would try to raise enough doubts about the vote so as to undermine what might even seem like a clear result. Considering Trump claimed that millions of people voted illegally when he supposedly won in 2016, it doesn't take much to imagine he'd do the same this year if he thought it would improve his chances of winning in a contested election. That's one reason researchers at the Transition Integrity Project rank Trump's allegations of voter fraud as among the most dangerous threats currently facing the election. Of course, considering how high the existential stakes seem to be in this election, it's not out of the question that Biden might be the one who disputes the results. Tellingly, in another simulation the Transition Integrity Project played out, a crisis unfolded after Trump won in the Electoral College but lost the national popular vote by 5 points. Trump claimed it was fraud that explained Biden's popular vote edge, but Biden retracted an election night concession and pushed Democratic governors in Michigan and Wisconsin to do those things, those power moves that we think only Republicans will try, right? He pushes the Democratic governors in Michigan and Wisconsin to send appointed slates of electors to Congress in conflict with the ones elected backing Trump. In his work, Foley also explored an alternate scenario in which Arizona was the tipping point state and Republican Governor Doug Ducey refused to certify the results to give Biden the state's electors. Get it? Another scenario. This time, just to be clear what happens in this scenario, Biden wins Arizona, which Greg told us was certainly well within the realm of possibility. He's leading in Arizona. But the Republican governor, what if his job, as usual, is to sign the certificate of ascertainment? And he says, well, I'm just not going to do it. You can't force me to sign this thing. You can try and work around me, but I'm not signing it because I'm crazy. What happens then? So he refuses to certify the results to give Biden the state's electors. During Congress's counting, congressional Democrats argue that Arizona's electors should be disqualified to give Biden the victory. The same argument that Pence made in the Pennsylvania scenario to claim Trump had won. So, and of course, at that point, you would then expect Democrats to say, okay, fine, look, we're being even-handed and nonpartisan. Let's just throw out Arizona's contested slate. And that leaves X number of electoral votes. And as it happens, Biden has won in that. And they take the back door to certifying an electoral vote count that puts Biden in the White House anyway. And Republicans attempt to do their best to explain why that's not satisfactory, and we're still back in the same situation. The scenarios laid out by the Transition Integrity Project and Foley shouldn't be taken as definite outcomes. That's, I think, should be clear by now, but okay. They do make clear that the rickety apparatus governing our electoral process could collapse if key actors decide to push against it. Worryingly, the public may be especially vulnerable to attempts to delegitimize the election. 2, faith in the Electoral College is already shaky because of the possibility of a popular electoral vote split like in 2000 and 2016. And worse yet, support for the Electoral College is increasingly polarized by party. A conflict over which electors should count would only exacerbate those concerns, and because many Americans still expect to know who won on election night, Trump is counting on that one, this could create a situation where much of the public isn't ready for or is ready to reject sizable shifts in the vote after Election Day, which could make it easier to cast doubt on the outcome. But even if the worst scenarios don't come to pass, the fact that we lack a neutral electoral arbiter is surely a ticking time bomb for our democracy. Such an institution may sound difficult to create, but many individual states have used judicial panels to successfully sort through close elections. Some have failed at it, of course, and other democratic nations have far better laws to adjudicate contested elections. For now, though, in the absence of such measures, the peaceful transfer of power hinges on the expectation that that is how American elections work, but that may be increasingly hanging in the balance, as anyone living in this incredibly polarized era of U.S. politics will tell you. Okay. So we made it all the way through with just a few minutes to spare here. Thanks, Brian, for reminding us of this one. It is kind of scary. And I thought laid out the good basis for explaining just how complicated it sounds, but how simple it turns out to be. I don't want Biden to win, so I'm not signing the certificate. I don't want Biden to win, so I'm going to sign a different certificate. It could be that simple. And then what do? Well, you're not allowed to just make up your own certificate. Well, what if the authority that says which certificates, or has the right to say which certificates are valid and which aren't, just says, we don't care how dumb it looks. We're going to say that this certificate that you made out of bubblegum wrappers is legitimate. And there's no appeal from that. The only place you could possibly take it is the U.S. Supreme Court, and they say they won't touch it. It's not that difficult to understand, especially now that we've gotten to that situation on subpoenas that we've been explaining to you both at Daily Kos and here on the radio since 2007. What happens if you just say, no, I'm not going to do it? Who gets to make the call here? And, if ultimately the Supreme Court is the one we turn to and they say, that's not for us, it's a political question, then it's going to be decided in a political manner. And everybody's going to say, that's blatantly partisan. And the U.S. Supreme Court is going to say, yes, that's the actual doctrine. We say, let the partisans handle it. Why that's the doctrine, I don't know, but it is. So, we could go into explaining how that got to be the doctrine, but we don't have time for that because it's almost time to leave. I did want to circle back and mention something I had said to Greg offhandedly, and we didn't really read or discuss anymore, about Spanish language radio advertisements being used to target the Biden campaign in a weird or unfair manner. So I'll just mention to you that there are articles, and I've got one from a couple days ago from Politico. This is F and then a bunch of blanks. Effing crazy. Florida Latinos swamped by wild conspiracy theories. A flood of disinformation and deceptive claims is damaging Joe Biden in the nation's biggest swing state. This, I think, focusing on the QAnon vector, I guess having found Google Translate, is now moving into that section, but they're also doing it via radio. George Soros, apparently, it says here, directs a deep state global conspiracy network. A Joe Biden win would put America in control of Jews and blacks. Thanks very much for that one. The Democratic nominee has a pedophilia problem. These are all examples of the kind of wild disinformation that is inundating Spanish-speaking residents of South Florida ahead of Election Day, clogging their WhatsApp chats, Facebook feeds, and even radio airwaves at a saturation level that threatens to shape the outcome of the nation's biggest and most closely contested swing state. The sheer volume of conspiracy theories, including QAnon, and deceptive claims are already playing a role in stunting Biden's growth of Latino voters, who make up about 17% of the state's electorate. So there you go. The onslaught has had an effect, said Eduardo Gamara, a pollster and a director of the Latino Public Opinion Forum at Florida International University. So, smart if evil play, right? If you think it all hinges on Florida and all of Florida hinges on the Latino vote, and there's not enough time for the rest of America to notice what's going on in Spanish language WhatsApp channels and radio stations and do something about it, and it doesn't immediately present itself what could be done. You just lie to people and tell them crazy crap and they believe it, and there's not enough time left before they cast their votes to do anything about it. The deed is done. So there you have it. I guess that's where it's happening. Keep an eye on that. Keep an ear out, of course, for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, which comes up next and probably has a lot better news for you. It'll be much more uplifting. Oh, that's right. They exist in the same world and planet that we do, and it might be just as bad.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Well, here's what he's got on tap for you, at least some of it. Trump's latest gift to white evangelicals, cutting women's health care even more. A federal judge ordered all federal prosecutors in Manhattan to read her opinion on withholding evidence. That seems important. And Bill Barr, who we talked about earlier, not only wanted to charge protesters with sedition, he wants to indict Seattle's mayor. Check that out next.